Alright, this is a quick video today, but it's going to be full of action-packed information. So the thing we're talking about now are the top three things that people don't tell you about digital nomad lifestyle. So a little background about myself, first of all, is I've been traveling and working as a digital nomad for the last 5 years, 6 years maybe. Been financially independent for about 8 years, 10 years. So I've been able to live and travel the entire planet and live well while I'm doing that. And there's three things that I've discovered that people don't tell you or that you don't realize about being a digital nomad that I want to share with you. I'm going to go ahead and get into it. I'm going to go over the topics now and then I'll show you the screen share. The first topic that I'm going to talk about is air pollution. That is a huge thing that people don't really understand, and it can have a massive impact on your productivity, on your lifestyle, and just your ability to live well and the quality of life that you probably have in a Western world or Western country. Second thing I'm going to talk about is visas. This is a really common topic when people are interested in becoming a digital nomad. They're not really sure how to get the visa, what visa is right for them, and that whole process. So I'll dig into that a little bit. Number three is stability. So being able to be productive, to be stable, to also work well while you're traveling. So especially with a partner, these things can be quite difficult. So I'm going to go ahead and get into the screen share. I'm going to show you a few things. Just hang on for 1 second. Right on. Okay. So this is the first topic I talked about was air pollution. So this is my main resource when it comes to checking about the air quality in any country. It's a website called IQ Air. I'm not affiliated with them, but I've just used them for a long time. So AQI is Air Quality Index, and it's the amount of particulates that are in the air at any given moment. You have a few different types of air pollution. You have ozone pollution, you have PM 2.5 pollution, you have NO2, SO2 I believe, and you have maybe a fifth one. So you have 5 types of air pollution that are in the world. Now, if you're from the US like I was and I grew up there, I grew up on the East Coast, which has some of the freshest and most beautiful air, like the Shenandoah area, Blue Ridge Mountains. So I grew up experiencing delicious air that you could breathe at any moment. And I didn't realize that traveling around the whole world, and I've been around the planet multiple times at this point, that the entire world, for the most part, is filled with air pollution. So I just want to use this as a reference. So you can see here in the US, we're primarily green with some blue. This is in the winter, so there's not going to be a lot of fires, or maybe in Canada they have something going on. But generally speaking, you can see here that most of it's green. You just follow the radar here. Now, if we look over at Europe, we'll see that what happens is you have all this Saharan dust. I'm just going to go over a few of the common issues that I've learned through traveling the world. So I lived in Europe for quite a while, and what you have is this Saharan dust from the Sahara Desert will blow with the wind. So if the wind is going to the left, it'll blow this way, and then occasionally it also blows up over Europe and covers Europe. Now what happens when this happens is the whole sky will be kind of dark, but most importantly you just cough. You cough, you sneeze, you have kind of allergy reactions. Myself, I'm very sensitive to the air pollution, which is why I made it the first point in this talk. So you also have a lot of other epicenters of lots of pollution. You have India, Middle East. You have India over here, and then you have China, which is probably the biggest polluter, I'd say, by far, as compared to some of the Sahara Desert dust and the kind of more impoverished African countries that will burn their trash, and they'll burn their plastic bags and burn everything. So that burning creates all this air pollution. So it really can be a huge impact on you and your life if you're not used to it. So for example, you'll see in Southeast Asia, this is how it is here, and you'll see that a large portion of the globe, in fact, is covered with air pollution. So these are massive clouds of pollution that sit up in the air and that come down when the sun is up. Then the particulates will rise in the atmosphere, and then when the sun goes down, those particulates will come down to the ground. So that is causes a lot of sneezing and coughing during like the early morning or like dinner time, roughly like evening when the sun goes up and sun goes down, and the air pressure will change and the pollution will go up or down depending upon the time. So that is something to really keep in mind, and it's something that I wish I knew before I started traveling is, hey, there are sub areas on the planet that you just don't want to visit. You don't want to be in a place that has a lot of air quality problems, because if you stay there for a week, 2 weeks, not a big deal. A month, not a big deal. But if you're like myself and you're constantly traveling with really no center point, then you're going to run into this. For example, I discovered or developed some health issues living in Thailand, in Bangkok specifically, for about a year and a half. So these problems can come up with respiratory issues and things like that if you're surrounded by air pollution all the time. I also happen to be like on the river where they had the boats, and it's just really gross. And they use a lot of Europe, for example, was also difficult for me to live due to the diesel fuel. So they'll use diesel fuel in Europe a lot, which will really smell like rotten eggs. It doesn't smell good. So that is the air quality. One also thing I want to add to the list is time zones. So realizing that when you're traveling, some people are really attracted to the cheapness, for example, of Southeast Asia. And what you'll find is the time zone is 12-hour different from the East Coast. So if you're planning on moving somewhere that's out of the country or far away from the United States or the Western civilization, as you might call it, then you want to really be prepared for the time change and the time zone difference. You know, for example, I'll be working overnight living here, but when I go back to the US, then I'll be working day. So if you're changing this schedule every 3 to 4 to 6 months, then you really are spending a lot of time readjusting to the time zone. So that kind of leads me, we're going to skip the second point and come back to it, or the third point and come back to it rather. The fourth point is related to, what was it, air pollution, time zone, visas, and also, let's just talk about visas. The fourth point will come back to me. The visa situation is also a little bit interesting. So some basic information. Let's start with Southeast Asia because it's a cheap one. These countries will generally give a 45-day visa on arrival for Americans. Bali, for example, around here somewhere, will give you 30 days. You have the option to extend for 30 days. There's lots of visa options for Southeast Asia. There's also a lot of visa options for Europe, for tourist visas, or you can do, for example, 90 days in the Schengen zone. Then you can do another 90 days in the UK. This is a separate visa area. People used to do Croatia a lot, but that recently just became part of Schengen. So that's your 90-day limit is part of that now. But there's also a ton of other countries that you could visit. For example, the Caribbean, if you have some resources to live there, they offer plenty of visas. And there's a lot of different countries, for example, in South America, that will offer you a visa. So you can stay in one place for 1 year, 2 years, for example. I lived in Georgia for a while, which is over here near the Black Sea, and that offers a 1-year visa for digital nomads. So there's a lot of options for visas. With a little bit of due diligence and research, you can really find the one that works best for you. And the last thing that I want to talk about after the visas is going to be just stability. That's what it was. So being able to have a stable lifestyle can sometimes be a challenge when you're traveling the planet. So what I'd recommend is to really have a core structure on what you plan to do that day and what you plan to attain over that period of the stay in that country. So for myself, I'll just map out my last year just to give you some reference points of what I'm talking about here. So earlier in the year, I was in Amsterdam. So I was a Dutch resident, so I have a residency there, so I have an apartment and everything in Amsterdam. I was able to get that through the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty. That is a visa program that's through the United States and Netherlands. I was able to become a Dutch resident, so I have a place there. After living in the Netherlands, it was too cold, so I spent about 6 months in Aruba down here. So I was able to utilize the Dutch residency in order to have a long-term stay in the Dutch Caribbean, which is a very beautiful, beautiful place, absolutely gorgeous. It's right here off the coast of Venezuela. It's a small little island outside of the hurricane zone in the Caribbean. After that, I visited some friends and family in the United States for about 3 months on the East Coast. I was able to see my friends and families, good time. And then after that, I was able to spend the last 2-3 months or so in Southeast Asia. And then I'll be going around here for the next 2 months during the winter. I'll be visiting my partner's family in Korea, and then I'll be going out to Hawaii next year, and then maybe back to the United States and back through Europe. So you can see that my travel plans vary wildly every 3 to 6 months to a new country, new location, new place. So it can be very difficult to maintain some level of stability when you are living this sort of lifestyle. So what I'd suggest is some ways to alleviate that is to just try to be as disciplined but also as organized as possible. So really set up your days, set up your goals, and set up the things that you want to achieve in that certain amount of time. So for example, if you're in this country for this long, then you want to set up a schedule in that way. So that concludes the video. I have a call coming in, so I'm going to take this, and thank you so much.